Episode 3, The First Disturbance.
Scene 1. Dissonance in the Heartlands.
The morning had been ordinary in the way only peace can be. Unremarkable, almost shy. Sunlight rested gently on the heart clearing, warming the pale grasses and coaxing a lazy shimmer from the air. The world tree stood at its center, vast and patient, its roots breathing slowly beneath the soil like a sleeping giant. Then the sound came. It was not a roar, it was not thunder, it was a shrill, piercing whistle. Thin, metallic, and wrong. A high, screaming note that cut straight through the layered quiet of the Dreamwilds, slicing past birdsong and wind alike. It sounded like steam forced through a wound in the earth. The clearing recoiled, leaves shuddered along their stems, the ground vibrated. Not violently, but insistently, as if warning something to stop. Smaller creatures clutched their ears or pressed low to the soil, the sound too sharp to flee from and too relentless to ignore. At the edge of the world tree's roots, the cause of the disturbance revealed itself. The lame badger stood knee-deep in loose earth, his digging tools abandoned at his feet. Dust clung to his fur and streaked the faces of his children, who huddled together nearby, coughing and crying as the ground trembled beneath them. A half-dug burrow gaped open behind him, its entrance cracked where thick roots had begun to tighten in response. "I was told the doors were open," Badger shouted, his voice deep and rough, a low bass note vibrating with fury and fear. "You said there was room for all of us," the roots answered. They did not speak in words, they sang in tension. Fine, glowing filaments slid from the soil. Root Sprites, drawn from their resting state by stress and intrusion, they wound themselves tighter around the world tree's exposed veins, their forms sharp with strain. The air around them rang with a brittle, high-pitched resonance, like glass pulled too thin. The whistle rose again. Higher now, more desperate. Badger staggered back as the ground bucked beneath him. One of his children cried out as the soil shifted, sending a spray of dust into the air. "We just need space," Badger bellowed, turning toward the gathered onlookers. "A roof, a place where my cubs can sleep without the ground shaking beneath them." The root sprites flared brighter in response, their tones tightening, the vibration passing through the clearing like a clenched jaw. They were not angry, they were alarmed. Every new scrape of earth was a pain they could not ignore. The soundscape fractured, Badger's voice pressed downward, heavy, insistent, full of need. The roots screamed upward. Sharp, trembling, stretched to their limit. Between them, the clearing filled with dissonance so severe it was almost physical, a clash of frequencies that set teeth on edge and thoughts spinning. For Thinksy, somewhere at the edge of the crowd, it was unbearable. A shriek and a growl locked together, neither willing nor able to yield. This was no battle of heroes and monsters, this was a neighbor's argument, raw and public. Children cried in the dust. Roots tightened in fear. The world tree stood silent, bearing the strain without judgment. And the worst part, the part no one dared say aloud, was that no one was wrong. Badger wanted safety, the roots wanted peace. The Dreamwilds, open and healing, had made room for both, and now demanded a choice no one had prepared to make. The whistle did not stop, it waited.
Scene 2. The Mechanical Miracle.
They arrived not with a shout, but with inevitability. The crowd at the edge of the heart clearing parted as if pulled by an unseen current. Hope flickered across faces still tight with fear and irritation. Someone whispered their names. Someone else exhaled, long and relieved. The Eternal Three had come. For a moment, nothing happened. The shrill whistle still hung in the air. The roots remained tense. Lame Badger stood rigid, his shoulders squared in defiance, his children clinging to his legs. The Root Sprites vibrated, drawn taut like strings wound too far. Then Teddy stepped forward. His eyes did not linger on the children, nor on the glowing sprites. They moved instead. Quick, precise, measuring. He tilted his head slightly, as if listening to something beneath the sound itself. Too much pressure, he muttered, not unkindly, but without warmth. His hands traced invisible lines through the air, mapping forces rather than feelings. When the dance began, it did so at his tempo. Teddy's movements were controlled and economical, redirecting stress the way an engineer reroutes load through a failing structure. Each step eased the strain on the world tree's roots, shifting tension away from the breaking points. The ground responded almost immediately, the violent shudder softening into a tolerable hum, the whistle lowered by a fraction. Thanksy followed, light gathered around her. Not bright, not radiant, but patterned. It pulsed and folded into itself, forming slow, mesmerizing loops that hovered between Badger and the roots. The shapes moved with a soothing inevitability, rising and falling like a breath carefully guided. The Root Sprites flickered, their sharp resonance smoothing into something rounder, quieter. Badger's children stopped crying, their eyes fixed on the floating glow, their bodies slackening as the noise receded into the background of their awareness. It was not understanding, it was sedation. Lucy took her place last. She did not dance outward, she planted herself between the two sides, feet firm, spine straight, arms slightly open. As the movements of the others circled her, the anger in the clearing seemed to lean toward her. Drawn, absorbed, Badger's rage dulled, the Root's alarm faded. The emotions did not vanish, they flowed into Lucy, weighed her shoulders, tightened her jaw. She held them anyway, steady and unyielding, until the air itself settled into neutrality. The dance completed its cycle, the whistle ceased, silence fell. Not the gentle quiet of the morning before, but a manufactured calm. The ground leveled, the roots loosened their grip, the clearing breathed again. A murmur passed through the onlookers, relief, gratitude, ah, the miracle had worked, and yet, Badger still stood without a home. The half-dug burrow remained collapsed and unusable. The world tree's roots, though no longer screaming, were still crowded and sensitive beneath the soil. The three had extinguished the fire. But the damage remained, unaddressed and unresolved. Badger looked at the roots withdrew from his gaze. They were closer than ever, side by side in enforced harmony. Yet further apart than before, the dance had aligned their bodies, not their needs. As the light faded and the Eternal Three drew back, the clearing remained quiet, too quiet, a silence heavy with things unsaid, with solutions postponed rather than found. The problem had not been solved, it had merely been muted, and somewhere deep beneath the heart clearing, the world tree recorded the imbalance, and waited.
Scene 3. The Seed of Dissatisfaction.
When the light finally withdrew and the last echoes of movement dissolved, the silence did not heal the clearing, it pressed down. Dust settled where the dance had passed, revealing what remained unchanged. The half-dug burrow still gaped open at the world tree's edge, unfinished, unstable, marked with quiet warnings Teddy had traced through the air moments earlier. Lane Badger stood before it for a long time, then he turned. "So," he said, his voice low and dry, "where do we sleep tonight?" Teddy answered without hesitation. His tone was measured, careful, already moving toward solutions. "For safety reasons, this site must remain closed. We will guide you to a temporary location along the eastern shore." "Temporary," Badger repeated, tasting the word. He let out a short breath that might have been a laugh. "That's easy to say when you already have a new home." The words landed harder than they sounded. Teddy stiffened. Not offended, but unsettled. "This is not a punishment," he replied. "It is a redistribution of space until a permanent solution, decided by whom?" Badger cut in. The question hung between them, unanswered. Around them, the gathered crowd began to thin. Creatures drifted away in small clusters, their relief already cooling into doubt. Conversations dropped into murmurs. "They used to heal hearts," someone whispered. "Now they assign plots," murmured another. No one spoke loudly enough to be challenged. No one stayed long enough to be confronted. Lucy watched them go, her posture still steady, her eyes heavy. The anger she had absorbed lingered in her chest, unresolved, like heat trapped beneath stone. Thinksy's light had faded completely. She looked at the emptying clearing and said nothing. The Eternal Three remained where they were, framed by a problem they had neutralized but not solved. No cheers followed. No gratitude rose to meet them. The world tree stood silent. They had ended the disturbance. They had restored order, yet the air carried no sense of victory. Only the quiet realization that their greatest strength had failed them where it mattered most. The seed had been planted, and it did not need anger to grow, only time.